Jack Thomas, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, Will. Thanks for having me on the show. Pleasure to be here.
And tell our listeners where you are coming from today.
I am currently coming from Bangkok in Thailand, where I've been an expat for about 15 or 16 years, but I'm not Thai. I was born in the UK, so British expat abroad. I will stay in Thailand for the foreseeable future, at least. Can't see myself going back to the UK.
And you and I met on a panel that we did. Was it Glowfox?
Yep.
It was Glowfox, wasn't it? Where we were
That's
talking
right.
about sort of digital in the fitness industry. And since then, we've had a number of conversations. And I was really keen to get you on the podcast to talk about developing a world-class team of instructors, which you have done at your facility in Bangkok. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your studio and what you guys are doing there?
Yeah, sure. So I'll take it back to when I first got in the fitness industry. So I was a 5-year expat in Bangkok, 6 years when I first got into the industry 10 years ago. Now, the Bangkok fitness industry was very underdeveloped at the time. I went back to the UK to get my qualifications, really, I think, with the idea of coming back as a personal trainer. That was kind of what I saw myself doing. And we talked about this the other day, where when I was doing my certification, there was a lot of talk about exercise to music during my qualification. And that was one of the modules that I could have chosen, which I chose not to do. I didn't really think it was best suited to me. So I didn't really see myself as a group class instructor, but I came back, I started working at a studio. And actually the first thing I did was boot camps in the park. And I absolutely loved it. And there was nothing like that really going on in Bangkok. There was certainly no boutique fitness scene like you see today, nothing like the studios you get in New York and London and everything else. And I just really loved doing the boot camps. I thought it was a great way to connect with people. You know, we'd have like 15, 20 people sometimes. It really was big at the time, and it was really a lot of fun. And I learned a lot about how to connect with people as a coach, how to coach large groups of people as well. And looking back, I think that was really invaluable experience. So I worked at that studio for 5 years. I did all sorts of different types of group classes. So I used to do one with these expat wives. So it's a group outdoor boot camp in their little kind of compound in Bangkok. There must have been about 8 to 10 women. And it was raining one day, and they said, "Oh, would you mind doing a aqua boot camp in the swimming pool?" So I was like, well, I don't really know what that is, but sure, let's give it a go. So we went in and I just kind of like improvised. And then afterwards I was like, well, maybe that could be a little bit better. So I just looked on YouTube to see other little things that we could do in the swimming pool. And these women absolutely loved it. So I added one in extra on top of their boot camp each week. And at the time it was just kind of like hustling, getting experience, making money. But actually when I look back to these experiences, I really gained a huge amount from just taking every single opportunity that came in the group class space. Now, shortly after that, we opened up pretty much the first boutique fitness training studio in Bangkok called The Lab, which is still around today. And that had a big focus on, I guess kind of like an F45 style circuit training class very early in 2012, even by worldwide standards, but certainly by Bangkok standards. And we really created this cool group class training program. You know, I was pretty much leading that, one of the main instructors there. And although I was doing personal training, to be honest, my real love was actually group fitness and group class.
Interesting. Even though there was PT that was leading you into the industry.
Yeah, well, that was my first thought, really, because I saw that the quality of personal training wasn't particularly good in Thailand. And that was kind of what drew me into the industry. But it was actually group classes that I really enjoyed the most. And that's all I do now. I'm, fast forward, and I now run a company with 3 studios, and I don't do personal training, but I still do jump in and do the group classes. I was at that company for 4 years. Then I left that company to set up Base. And so we had a vision of raising the standards of the fitness industry in Asia. We had our first location in 2016. We opened 2 more each year after that. And then since then, we've been focusing on building technology to help record and track our clients' progress as they go through our group classes. One of the favorite parts of the job for me, and this is why I was really keen to have a chat to you on the podcast, is developing our group class coaches. We invest so much into their learning, into their education, into that first month when we're kind of teaching them how to deliver a great group class and what our group class concept is. And that's really become an area of big passion for me, developing the coaches, building them up to be world class. So anything I can share on that today, well, I'm very happy to do so.
Fantastic. So obviously our listeners are all group fitness people. We have a few people from the boutique sector, some people that teach in the community, and then other people that teach in gyms. And I think the thing that we've talked about a lot on the podcast is that the boutique sector did a really good job of generally raising the standards of group fitness, and also proving the value and profitability of group fitness as a service and a product when it's done really, really well. So everybody listening to this can definitely learn a lot from people like you that sit at the sort of top end of the premium sector and the boutique sector, and how you go about creating those really meaningful experiences before, during, and after class. I want to wind it right back and talk about your process for finding and training and then launching your instructors into the field. How do you go about selecting who the instructors are, and what do you look for when you're looking for a really, really great group fitness teacher?
I think sometimes you meet someone and you're like, boom, this person's got everything that it takes. And sometimes you just sort of see the potential there, but you can see they haven't quite come out of their shell yet, or they're a little bit nervous. We get that quite a lot in Thailand because it's quite an underdeveloped industry. There's not a huge talent pool. So sometimes you have to kind of spot that rough diamond and really sort of make them great. The way that Base has evolved is that we're a very international brand. So we have mostly Thai instructors, but they either grew up in the US or Australia, or they're half Thai or half European. So it's kind of happened a little by accident, but it's got a very international feel. And so what that's meant is that most of the applications we get are people that want to come into that environment. They already speak English quite well, or perhaps they're quite international themselves, and we'd kind of be the first choice for doing this kind of thing in Bangkok.
Your classes are all taught in English, or do you teach?
They are all taught in English.
Yeah, English, which is a pretty common thing for the boutique sector around the world, even in non-native English-speaking countries, right?
It is, yes, especially in like capital cities, I would say, that have quite an international feel. And I think most Thais here at least speak enough English to understand the class. If not, they might come with their friend, or it can be done very visually. We did a digital offering as well during COVID, and that was all in English, although we've done a few live classes in Thai. But yeah, going back to the recruitment process, we attract the people that have sort of are fairly consistent with our brand typically. And I think if you go back to that kind of initial meeting, find out their reasons for being in the fitness industry is a big one for me. They've got to have that genuine want for helping people.
So this is actually, I was going to ask you this. You pull from people within the industry rather than going outside of the industry, or is it a mix? Because I know in boutique there's especially when it comes to cycle, like literally the studio and London Cycle, but also cycle generally through Soul Cycle, there's kind of a move towards pulling performers in and then putting them in front of a class, which it works. I've always had views on that, because obviously I came from the fitness background, and I was kind of like, are you training them to understand all of the fundamentals? And I've been to a number of boutique cycle classes where I am a little bit dubious about the efficiency and safety of some of the moves. So tell me a little bit about like where you draw from.
Well, one of our sort of values really is that we have qualified coaches that understand, how to coach a squat, stuff like that. So, we wouldn't pull from the performer category. I'm very good friends with the ladies that run Physique 57 here, and they do that a lot. They get in dancers, they get in performers, even like drama students, and kind of like, because so much of it is kind of hyping up the crowd, right, and being good on the mic. We are more shifted towards the performance end of the spectrum, but we still really believe in creating this experience. So we kind of sit somewhere in the middle. You have to be qualified, or you have to at least be in the process of doing your qualifications. And then we just see if it's a personality fit, see if this person first and foremost is in the industry for the right reasons. I think that's a non-negotiable really for us, that they really truly want to help people. Even if they only get one person turn up in their class, they're still going to deliver a good session. And that's something that we kind of teach as a value down the line as well. Things like outgoing personality, obviously you sometimes think, okay, this person's going to be very suited for group class, but that's not always the case. We've got one fantastic group class instructor that was actually very nervous, very quiet in the interview, but seemed like a really nice guy. He said he was more nervous than he actually came across, actually. And he's turned out to be an absolute superstar, because he's really followed all of our processes. He's followed all of the little tips we give. We're basically just connecting with the people in front of him. And he's done that so effectively and so well that he's now one of our favorite coaches. So I think over time you get better at identifying these people quickly.
Yeah, and you often think of group fitness instructors and class teachers as being extroverts, but if I look at all of the best instructors, it's right split down the middle. There's a lot of introverts that when they get up on stage or in front of a group or put a mic on, just become a different person. And which is quite funny, because often people within the classes will see them outside of class and be quite surprised at how shy they are.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's yeah, something that comes very naturally for some people. I mean, for me, if I look at the kind of group class instructor that I don't want that crazy in your face, larger than life personality. I actually prefer a little bit more down tempo, but you can see they really care. So I feel there's kind of like a place for everyone, but you don't necessarily want that massive extrovert every time.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so you've identified the people that you want to bring on. Tell me a little bit about your training process, because I know that a lot of people listening to this podcast are instructors that have been instructing for a long time, a decade or more. And it's probably been a long time since they actually did the training process. And one of the reasons they listen to this podcast is because they get to listen to people like you and our other guests who can sort of refresh their thinking on how they might go about developing themselves. I know for me, I obviously started at Les Mills in New Zealand, and I went to like the Les Mills Academy. We had to do an audition, and they basically just chose people based on how they moved and look. And then we did this 3-month process. And that was before I even did my fitness qualification. It was kind of done in parallel. So like I know the value in doing this kind of academy type approach. So I'm really keen to hear about how you go about instilling these values and skills.
Well, it's become pretty much my favorite part of the job. I do absolutely love it for many different reasons. I mean, it's been cool to refine the process year by year. We call them waves, right? So we're on wave 12, I think, now of coaches. So each time we used to have 2 or 3 coaches coming on. Now it's a little bit more, especially as we expanded and opened a new location. I think we had a wave of like 7 people. So we set up a WhatsApp group. We get them all introducing each other to everyone to each other, knowing each other a little bit more. And often they become really good friends kind of within that wave. And that's kind of part of that camaraderie of kind of going through the same thing together. Everyone's really excited to be in the industry. And just to go back on a previous point, I actually prefer brand new people into the industry because we have a set way of doing things. We have a technology that surrounds the programming. Most of the programming is standardized, so there's elements the coaches can decide themselves. But if they've got years of experience, they just don't typically fit into that. There's definitely exceptions for sure over the last few years and over my time in fitness, but typically I love getting that brand new person in the industry. And one thing I love about it is in 3 months, I feel like we can get them to a level that I was at after like 3, 4, or 5 years. It's kind of like all the education, all the knowledge, all the structure for training, which I didn't really get. I learned so much from my predecessors, and I really owe a huge amount to them, but we just weren't at the stage at Base is at now. So I'm really happy to offer that. So it starts off with the recruitment process, of course. Then we get them in for a 2-week intensive, but it actually goes on for about 2 months. And we would hope to get them signed off to do classes by then. Get to know each other, first of all. Talk about some of the values that Base has, values that they have personally. I think that's a good way to understand, that we're on the same page, and talk about what's important to us. And then we really go through the whole group class process, starting right at the very beginning. And the way that we frame it is that if you get one part right, the next part is much easier. So you should have the elements that you can plan and program. You should do that before you come into Base, right? So that's the night before, maybe, or a few hours before, or you can do it weeks ahead if you want. Then you arrive at Base at the very, very least 20 minutes before the class. That's like an absolute non-negotiable, which I don't see that often in the industry. And we didn't really do in my old studio. And that was something on day one. I was like, absolute bare minimum, 20 minutes, you're into the class, into the room, so that you can set the class up in the right way.
Yeah, and I like that is so important, because if you don't arrive in enough time, you can't get yourself in the mental headspace, right? And I say this having lived in London for a long time. And actually, one of the reasons I gave up regular classes in London was because I would get so stressed out on the tube, because I would give myself, a full hour, meaning that I could be there that 20 minutes before. But if the tube didn't arrive, or it was a bit packed, or it was raining or anything like that, it would shorten my travel distance. And I would turn up at the gym so stressed, and my head wouldn't be in the right place. And by the end of the class, I had pulled it around because I enjoy teaching and I was in the moment, but walking into the classroom, I just wasn't present. And I reflect on that now and think it definitely wasn't putting my best foot forward for either the facility or myself or my members.
And I think talking about these things and kind of these values and getting it out early, I think helps.
And I didn't enjoy it either. Happen. Like I enjoyed the class less because I was stressed about it than I would have been if I'd come earlier. And so like it enables a better experience for you as well as an instructor.
Exactly. No, totally agree. And I think if you can address these things early, people just kind of do it. It's kind of part of setting those expectations at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then things fall into place much, much easier rather than trying to change a culture later. So you come in 20 minutes before, we talk about positivity. It is one of our values, but we also talk about those times when you just can't be positive, when you really have just been having a really bad day. And we try and frame it as professionalism kicking in. And whether you're digital online fitness or whether you're in person, I think this is a huge value to have yourself. You should want to give that one person, if it's just one person in the morning that's arrived at your class, or 50 people if it's a massive outdoor boot camp, the very best service and the very best class, something that you can be proud of and that moves them forwards. And that needs to kick in above sort of how you're feeling on that day. So we talk a lot about that, because I know in the past when I first started as an instructor and I had one person in the class, I know that sometimes I didn't come across giving my best self, and I feel embarrassed now to look back at that, and it's just not okay at base. So we kind of prepare them for these times and these moments, like leave the bad vibes at the door, come in, want to give them an amazing session regardless of the circumstances, and then 5 minutes in you're going to feel great, and at the end of the class you're going to feel great, right?
I have a question on that. So when I did back to my academy, and one of the guys that was instructing, his view was that if you've had a bad day, you just need to wipe it away and never share that with your class. So never, whereas and I took that with me and did that for a while, and I've actually changed my approach. And if I'm having a bad day, I will share a snippet of why my day has been bad, but in a positive way, and that I'm really glad to be here in front of you because I know that I love teaching classes. I know that I love doing this. And so I can put away the bad stuff. Do you have what's your approach and what's your instructor's approach?
I think that's good. It wouldn't work for me. I know that wouldn't work for me personally. I really think there's like a way to do it. And I think that's hard, especially if you're scaling. It's a little bit hard sometimes to nail whether they're just having a bit of a whinge and a moan, or if they're framing it in a real motivational way. And the second one is brilliant because it makes it more authentic and it makes you more real. So the second one is like bang on the money, but I just think it's a little bit difficult to get. I think, when you have a look at Cycle, Soul Cycle, Peloton, these guys are just so incredible, and girls, that they can do this very naturally, and it actually ends up being better. For us, we don't really talk too much about that. We try and say just sort of leave your emotions to the door. But if I saw someone doing that and it was done in the right way, that would be awesome. But you almost need those like presenter like skills, I think.
This is and I think it was a great piece of advice for a brand new instructor, because I probably didn't have the skills to manage a room in the way that I do now. And so I think that now I can get people on board by talking about something negative that's happened in a funny or amusing or motivational way. Whereas when I was starting out and I was probably super stressed about just being at the front of a room and delivering stuff, I don't think I would have had that capacity. So I think it's definitely a skill that you learn. And I don't think it was bad advice for people starting out to just leave it at the door at all.
Well, I think for new instructors, you have to be pretty black and white, because if you say it's okay to do, someone might come in and go, oh, I'm supposed to share a story now about something that's going wrong. And they might just end up crying in front of everyone or misjudge it and end up, being very negative. So I think at the beginning for the early stage, you want to be very black and white. Sometimes still allow them some freedom.
Hard it is when you're just starting. Like it is. I mean, it comes naturally to me now, but it was very, very difficult to think of all those things, like being in front of a group, all the stuff you've got to do, safety, equipment, music, microphone. And if one little thing goes wrong, it just throws you off, which is, again, why being there 20 minutes before is such a great just rule, right? Because you can troubleshoot prior to the start and reduce your stress levels.
We are very aware that there's a huge amount to learn when you do a base class. And again, if I compare ourselves to other boutique studios, kind of more in Asia, the top dogs in London would widely do it very well. But, most of the time the instructor just runs in, there's no structure. It starts 5 minutes late, it's scribbled on the board, the music's all over the place. And we have a lot to learn and a lot to remember. And we're kind of aware of that. So we give allowances in the early stages. And that's why this process is so important. So they come early, they get the space set up, they make sure the workout's on the board, the equipment's out that they need. Then they go to the front desk and see who's a first timer in the class, how many people are in the class, because that affects how you might manage the space, especially if we have other personal training sessions going on, and just try and connect with people as they come in. So obviously the regulars, they should know their name. We've got Mind Body, so we can cheat with that and see who it is. Newcomers is huge. We talk so much about that. And I was actually on a consultation call today with a client of mine that I'm helping, talking all about new clients, first timers, and why they're just so unbelievably important. And it's a make or break situation. So they either love you, love what you do, they feel the class was at the right level for them, they connected with the coach and the staff, and they're like, boom, I can see myself being part of this community. Or they think, I'm never coming back to this place again, or worse still, I'm never going to any boutique studio again. This is definitely not for me, which is tragic.
I want to pause on this for a moment because I think it's something that people that teach in a gym may not have the same technology supporting them that boutiques do. So for those people that are listening to this and don't know, one of the things that MindBody does and other booking software that premium boutiques use that often gyms don't use, some might, but often don't, is that you get a little marker when someone is brand new to the studio. Do you get it when they're brand new to a style of class or just new to the studio?
Just to the studio on MindBody, and then we verbally get that at the beginning of the class. Or again, what we say is you should have, it's not always possible, but you should have had that conversation before they come in. If they're quite new, oh, have you been to base before? I've done one class. Have you done base build before? Oh no, this is a new one for me. Don't worry, I'll look after you. Because it goes a long way. Yeah,
because I know from teaching at a gym. So I obviously come from big box gym background, and I've done boutique as well, and I've done community and then digital. And I remember being at a gym, and you would always screen for new people at the start of a class. It was a very fundamental thing: screen for new people, screen for injuries. But the thing about asking who's new at the beginning of your intro is that it doesn't allow you to have any interaction or to give them any personal help. And that's something that boutiques do amazingly for personalization, which helps with retention and makes people feel wanted, is that you're not putting your hand up in the 30th second of the warm-up track saying I'm new. You're getting a little bit of personalized support before you start, but that is technology enabled because people through the booking software, the reception staff or the management staff are able to identify for instructors who is new. And that's something that people listening to this, that they might not have that, but it is so important at creating a really good environment. So if you don't have the check-in sheet telling you who's new, think about how you might go about introducing yourself to new people before the start of a class, because it really, really does change that initial impression. And that is what will get people coming back. They really do make snap decisions off that first class.
We've also built it into our processes so that the front desk also tell the coach, because, you know, the coach might miss it. They might be talking to one client, another client comes in. So the front desk will signal to the coach that this person is new, and the coach will just know to have a chat with them. I think all too often in this industry, it's like, okay, who's first time? Cool. Welcome. Who's got injuries? Okay, great. Got it. Off we go. Right.
Okay. I've a checklist.
I ticked those boxes.
Who's injured? I'll be giving options, anything else about safety of the room, and go.
Right, and then off you go, and you kind of forgotten completely, right? And you're telling them to do all sorts of things they shouldn't be doing because of their injury, or you're not even really paying attention to the fact that they're a newcomer. And again, it's that mindset, and this is what we want to kind of teach in the training, not just ABC, follow this, but it's like mindset things. You've got an obligation to that person's health and fitness to really give them an amazing session and show how base and how this type of training generally can help them. So that's kind of a real sort of focus on our training. So if you do that right, you've prepared the space, you program the class well, you've got to know them. When you come in and introduce the class, which we actually do on the second, I don't know if we're the only gym, but I think we possibly are. We train to start literally on the second, but again, it starts 90 seconds before. So between 60 and 90 seconds, we've got a mic that you can turn on in the other areas to call people in. And people know now that we start on time. Thailand's notorious for everybody being late, but at our classes, people are there on time because they know the deal.
There's a studio in London. I'm not sure if they still do it. It's called Dig Me, but basically they use Spivvy, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's essentially like the cycling system that gives all the tracking, and it has a video that goes along with it. But you hear the countdown for 60 seconds, and I think it's set like hard coded to start on the hour. So if you're in the room and if the instructor's there, it just starts going boom, boom, and the 60-second counts down, and then it starts on the minute. Yeah, it's really good. But I get I've always wondered, but I get the impression that is like coded into the system, and it's not the fact of an instructor starting it. It's like it's starting on the hour, and if you're not in, you're not in, and bad luck.
Funnily enough, I did a class at Dig Me, and I didn't hear the dudum because I wasn't in there. But I remember it starting bang on time and me having to run in and getting everything sorted. And it was a very good class, very well delivered. So so when you go to introduce the class, then, you know, I just want to check is it anyone's first time, or you might even know, let's say you have 8 people. Well, you know those 6, and those 2 you've already spoken to. So like, okay, welcome to the class, guys. Great to see you here today. Jenny, Joe, welcome to base. I know it's your first time. I'll look after you. Don't worry. So you don't even need to do like, is it anyone's first time? And a hand goes up at the back. And then do you do a handshake or a high five or whatever it is? You've kind of hopefully got that out the way. So the introduction is then easier. Right, it's less time that it takes. And then we break down structures. So it's a minute introduction, it's a minute explaining each station, because we find that instructors often over explain when they go through exercises, and then under coach when the class starts. So
which always really
teach them to
annoys
flip
me
it.
as a participant, because I'm like, oh, this, if you spend too long talking about this, it just means there's less time for me to actually be doing work. And I'm really here to do work. And I know that new people need the explanation, but I got this. I just want to sort of burn as many calories as I can in this class.
So we frame it a different way, actually. It'd be interesting to get your thoughts. So we think really to teach an exercise, when you're teaching 12 exercises, say in the class, before you actually start it, any more than 20 or 30 seconds and you're just wasting your time, because it's information overload and people look out the window very quickly. So you got to get good, and we practice this at succinctly wrapping up a movement in 3 or 4 cues in maybe even 15 seconds is fine. We say 10% of the learning comes from that initial explanation. About 30% of the learning comes in the warm-up, because you can say, okay, let's do squats, knees out, shoulders back, push-ups. You can go through the movements then, engage your core. You can talk about all that
body position
during the warm-up.
I completely agree. Like if in an equipment class like yours, and you can talk a little bit more about kind of exactly what that class is, but there's probably a couple of key safety things, or things that a new person or a person that hadn't used that equipment many times wouldn't know, that you need to know. Like, I don't know, like a yoke carry in a strongman class, you need to know where on your shoulders to put it. But in terms of like how to brace your core and bending your knees and dropping down to a squat, that should be dealt with, I think, in the warm-up completely.
Yeah. Well, it's even little things like do this, don't do that, don't do that. You end up giving like 8 cues for one exercise. And again, it's information overload. It actually has a detrimental effect, and then it becomes more confusing, and there's too much they're thinking about. So, we've worked on kind of getting that balance where we get out the important stuff that you need to know, but don't go too deep. Having them physically do the movements is 30% of the learning around that. And we say 60% of the learning comes from in the class, making sure they're doing it right when they actually get there.
Coaching them.
Sure, exactly. And if we know those 2 newcomers, we can put them on the same station, or we can put them near each other, and it enables the group class instructor then to give that 60%. What I find is that it's often flipped. So they spend ages setting it up and they waffle on and on and on about all the movements. And as soon as the class starts, it's every man and woman for themselves, You'll be finding terrible form all over the place, and they just kind of let it ride. So we talk about kind of flipping that on its head. Again, if you have 10 regulars, you really don't need to spend very long at all. And like yourself, you might have everybody else just like, come on, let's get on with it. I've come here to work out. Then we have the warm up, and we have a set specific way that that's done. Although we do give the coaches a lot of flexibility. Then it's 60 seconds until the class starts. If you get all of that right, the explanation, the stuff before the class, the programming, once the class has started, it should flow well and it should flow naturally. But if we go all the way back to step 1, if you came 10 minutes before the class and you were rushing around like a mad thing, you got the program a little bit wrong, you didn't get to meet the newcomers. You
didn't set the equipment up in the right place, so when they go to use it, you have to run over and like bring the weight or whatever.
Not enough weights, all of that stuff. You thought there was going to be 5 people, but 15 people walked in at the last minute, all of this stuff. And suddenly everything else gets harder and you're kind of playing catch up. So we're like, look, you want to do a great job in the industry. We want you to be industry leading coaches. You want to help impact these 15 people in the best possible way. So this is why we do what we do. It's not about you better be here 20 minutes before. That's the rules of base and you better follow it. We want them to understand why that's so important. So it's those initial stages that we really, really hammer. The actual main class, that's when we kind of have to get their friends in a little bit and do practice classes. We do it with the front desk team, which is always cool. It's always a bit of a celebration. And we started to practice a little bit like some of the coaching that they might have to go through in the class. So that's kind of very roughly our process. So we go through that and then we kind of troubleshoot as we go along. And sometimes we do some one-to-one work if someone's struggling to wrap movements up quickly or be succinct enough, or if they're perhaps struggling with confidence. So as I said, each wave of coaches that come in, we tweak it, we refine it, and we're quite happy with where we're at with it now.
And so so I think like, obviously you will quality assure, and I'm sure you have sort of managers within your clubs that will sort of go in mystery shop classes just to make sure it's all going well. For the people that are listening to this podcast that may not get a lot of feedback they might teach in the community, so therefore they're kind of self-managing, or they might teach in a gym where they have a group fitness manager, but they're really just a coordinator. They don't really provide any ongoing guidance. What do you recommend, or do you recommend that your instructors do anything for self-improvement and self-reflection? So not so much learning from other people or people within your club, but what do your instructors do for themselves to make themselves better?
Yeah, great question. So We build in a lot of feedback into the process. And it's, again, one of our values at Base is two-way feedback and communication. That's a big value of ours at Base. So we tell them at the beginning, you're going to be getting a lot of feedback. A lot of it's going to be constructive.
Don't take it badly.
Well, yeah, we're going to tell you what you're not doing well, but how to make it better. Just be ready for that. Be prepared for that. And again, sort of setting the expectations is a way that, and again, you can see quickly if they're really not open to feedback. I've done trial. So if we go back again a few steps, we always have our instructors do a trial training session. So if they're brand new in the industry, but they're just doing their qualifications, we might have them just do an easy personal training session with one of our front desk staff, something super basic. And so we can kind of see, oh yeah, that's probably a crucial part that I missed out. So we get to see how they interact with people, but then also we get to see how they take feedback. You know, it's very unusual that, and again, that this would also work for the experienced coach, because, that's a big value of ours. Sometimes experienced coaches don't want to hear it as much. So the experienced coaches that I've worked with that have been fantastic, when I gave them feedback at the end of their trial session, constructive feedback, or maybe we do it a bit differently here at Base, they've been really open to receiving that. So we've got a good idea already that they're going to be ready and open to that feedback. We talk a lot about the importance of connecting with clients, hanging around after the session. And again, it's not something we want to sort of put a time limit on. We want our coaches to want to do that, make friends with the clients, get talking to them, like see if there's anything that you can improve on, see if they have any feedback on your classes is good. But they've got a very, very strong feedback loop through the team. A lot of our staff do classes, so they do feedback as well. And I think we're fortunate that we have a lot of clients that are quite vocal and happy to express their opinions openly and freely. It's the way that I'll frame it.
They're on ClassPass too, so I guess they get their ClassPass consolidated feedback, and they're all data points.
Absolutely, yeah. They get the stars, and they get the. Actually, I find the comments are often more useful than the stars. All our instructors are like 4.8, 4.9, so it's sometimes hard a little bit to differentiate. But it was the comments really, I think, that really helped, if they commented specifically. And it wasn't always the instructor. Sometimes it would be, oh, it was too busy or something like that. And that's always good feedback to get. But again,
I had a 5-star rating on ClassPass, and then I got a 1-star because they got the wrong size shoes and they couldn't get them clipped into the bike. And it brought my average down. I'm like, oh man, that's so annoying. It wasn't my fault.
Well, actually, when we've investigated into those low ratings, often it has been something like that. Or sometimes they come late for the class.
And they don't get let in, and then they give
like, right, I'm giving this person 1 star. So that kind of manipulates the averages a bit.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, I completely made that all about me for a second.
No, it's okay. So big on feedback. It's a big value of ours. We want people that are naturally going to seek it out anyway. And again, what the way I try and frame it for new coaches is because I know in a way they're a little bit nervous when I join the class, and Jeff, our fitness manager as well. I know they know that, right? Absolutely, joining the class, and they know I'm going to have a chat with them afterwards, and I'm going to give them all the feedback. But the way I always frame it is like, well, obviously always make it constructive, like obviously, right? Like, this is how it could be better. This is the stuff you did well, all the usual sort of corporate stuff that you do. But I also say, look, I didn't get this when I joined the industry. This is going to accelerate you so fast. And I say, look, you've come so far. There are still things to work on. But man, you're a month into your group class training career, and this is already looking like a great class. You're connecting with people. The programming is good, but there are some things to tidy up, and there are some things that can improve. And I try and sell that process to them a little bit. Like, be happy that you have this feedback. So I know they still get nervous, and they still maybe don't quite look forward to the end of the class when I pull them over. But I know they do value it, and I know they do see that as an opportunity to get better. Another feedback loop we have is people talking to front desk. And that, again, is where everything kind of weaves in together. This reminds me a lot of the consultation call I had today, because we talked a lot about this kind of an ecosystem. But when your front desk staff connect with the clients coming in, the clients get maybe not comfortable talking to the coach, especially if they don't know them. But they get comfortable feeding back to the front desk team. And then, they would let me know, or the fitness manager know. And again, that helps us make that group class coach better. So lots of different ways, surveys we send out quarterly as well. So that's another avenue where people are quite open and honest, but there's a lot in there that we do. And then we kind of, to answer your question directly, we kind of create that culture where they want the feedback.
And it's a difficult thing to want, because sometimes feedback can be tough, right? But I think that the reality is, and we've definitely seen this since the pandemic, is that if you want a career in fitness, you need to be focused around what you're delivering to the customer. Like, you can't guarantee that a gym or a studio is going to continue to want your services if you're not having that customer-centric focus. And I mean, this is something I've learned over decades in the industry, because I genuinely, and I've said this before on the podcast, at 18 and 19, I got into teaching because I wanted to be the star on the stage. in New Zealand, the studios have, 100-person capacities, and they have massive, big, like, rock star stages and sound
Sounds
systems.
awesome.
I wanted to be at the center of that. And and over 2 decades, I'm still in the industry because I've gotten past that. And now I'm much more focused on the people in my classes. But it's just so important for longevity in your career to get comfortable with requesting feedback and creating a culture within yourself to want to understand what you could do better, because there is always something. There's one thing that I really miss being kind of running my own company, is that people are reticent to give me feedback because I guess I'm the boss, whereas it's something I miss. Like, it was a great thing about working for Les Mills and going down to New Zealand and doing those DVDs is that, well, back in the day, that ages me, is that you would go and you would have a program coach and they would give you pretty like direct feedback for a 5-day period and make you better. And it didn't always feel good, but it always made me better.
Yeah, I'll turn the tables a little bit. I mean, how do you get that now? How do you receive that feedback and make sure that you get it as a business owner?
Yeah, so I watch back. So most of the stuff I do at the moment, because I travel a lot, it tends to be videos, and I do a bit of digital teaching, and I always watch myself back. So I make a point to make sure that I watch back every digital product that I've done. So when we release it to our shift instructors, for example, but I watch it back kind of a month to 6 weeks after, so that I've forgotten the experience of it and I can look a little bit more objectively. That's really easy for me, obviously, because we produce this content that then gets sent out and it's up on platforms. But one of the things I recommend to our instructors is that once a week, now that everyone's got a smartphone that has a video on it or a computer, even if you're not teaching virtually, just set it up and self-record and then watch back, say a little snippet, 3 to 5 minutes of yourself teaching. And, you can vary it out. Sometimes you can watch your intro, sometimes you can watch your warm-up, sometimes you can watch the peak of a class or the middle of it, whatever. And just write down, one thing you did well and one thing you'd like to improve. And I keep it in a Google Doc and I just look back. And if I'm continually needing to improve the same thing, then I know that I need to dig in and put a bit more work into it. And that's kind of how I look at it, is if I'm continually doing something wrong, because, sometimes you can just have a bad class or say a dumb thing, and that's not something that you need to change. It just happens on the day. But if you're like, I'm consistently talking too much, I'm consistently using this verbal tick, like I'm saying, hey guys, let's do, and then repeating that all the time. And if you've got a record of it, you can actually change it. So that's how I do it and how I recommend our instructors do it.
It's interesting hearing these things that you say, right? That's something that I've really tried
verbal
to weed
ticks,
out.
yeah.
Yeah. I used to be a lot worse with and I'm definitely doing better at those now. But when I look back at the videos, it's like, yeah, I said that phrase a little bit too much.
I have a really bad habit of going, now, think, and then saying what it is. And when I was teaching for Les Mills and the DVDs would go out to instructors around the world, and then I would travel, I would hear instructors saying it back. They'd be like, instructors in Body Attack, which was one of the formats I taught, go, now, think. And I'm like, oh God, I say that so much that people are thinking. But, I don't know it's necessarily bad, but I need to vary it up. I don't want to be known for saying the same thing every time. And maybe there is a more impactful way I could deliver that information.
Sometimes it's overthinking. I think you're overanalyzing, but sometimes you just say that thing too damn much. There's been times when
there was a period when I did.
Yeah, with our digital fitness, actually, we found that happened a lot more because once you get the class running, well, it's mostly about going and coaching individually.
Yeah.
But suddenly you've got a camera and you're
and you're monologuing. It's a monologue.
It's different. So you either talk too much, you don't talk enough, you say the same things again and again, or one girl was just saying okay a lot. So we're going to do squats, okay? And it's like, in the end, we worked on it and she kind of phased it out, but she would always slip back into that.
But this is why self-reflection, and this is why I think that videoing yourself is the single most important thing that you can do in watching yourself back, because people can tell you're saying it too much, but you don't know. And when you watch your own video and you hear yourself saying the same thing over and over again, it's painful. And
it kind of grates away at your soul every time you hear it.
Will, stop. Oh, Will, you said it again. And then you actually change it because you're aware of it. But
you kind of can't unhear it once you're aware of it. Exactly. And then every time you say it when you're doing it, you're like, damn it. But that's the first step of making it better. But no, I would absolutely agree on that point. People sometimes ask me, because I do a fair bit of public speaking now, is, you know, how do you practice that? I used to hate public speaking. I was so nervous when I did my first group classes. And at school, I was the kid who just, you know, quickly said my piece and then passed the sheet on to like the next kid. But for me, the way that I got better was practicing, recording myself, filming myself, giving seminars or giving speeches, and then looking back at it, seeing what I did wrong and then doing it again. And then I found that there was one nutritional seminar that I did, and I think I recorded it 2 or 3 times and looked back, and that looks really good and natural, and you got a bit confused there. It didn't make much sense there. You waffled on. And then when I went to deliver it, it felt really natural. And it was almost like a turning point for me, but it took quite a lot of practice and quite a lot of analysis to get there. You know, this podcast, for sure, I will listen back and think, you know, how did I come across? And I listen to all the podcasts that I put out. And yeah, I absolutely agree. That's one of the best ways that you can get better at something. It doesn't just happen. You've got to kind of work on it.
I was going to mention this actually at the end when I get you to say how people can sort of follow up on what you are delivering and talk about your podcast. But when I listen to you talk, one of the things I notice is that you don't say and you're really good at continuing on and not having those verbal stumbling blocks that I know that I still fall into. But it's good to hear that that was a thing that you had to work on and train and wasn't necessarily something that just came naturally. Because I think a lot of people can think, oh, I will never get there.
Yeah, it definitely took me a while. When I first did the initial podcast, those first few episodes, I really had to script everything out. I could no way do it off the cuff. I tried to do one, and this is where the feedback loop was great. I tried to do one with a few bullet points, and I played it back to my girlfriend later, and she was like, nah, it's not good enough. It's like you waffled on. It didn't really have much structure. And I was like, damn it. So I really structured everything out and wrote bullet points for everything. Not bullet points, like whole paragraphs. And I would sometimes deviate, but I really scripted it out. This is only like 3 years ago. And I really needed to do that to produce what I considered good quality content. You know, 3 years on, I can just bullet point out and just roll with it, you know, and just look at the piece by piece and go through them. And I wrap it up fairly succinctly. You know, I might waffle on before, but now I can do it in 2 or 3 minutes before I go on to the next point. I keep those podcasts within 10 or 20 minutes. And I think doing this every week has helped massively. Like every single week for the last 3 years, I put out content every single Monday and listened back to it, got feedback from my friends. And I think that's really helped me become better.
I think one of the things that instructors can fall into the trap, especially if they're instructing as a full-time job or as a significant part of their job, is that they teach so many classes that when they're not teaching, they just don't have the energy to look back and review what they've been doing. But it is really the key way to become an expert in your field is to do self-review. I did a little bit of consulting and review for one of the new fitness qualifications that's going into the group fitness environment in the UK. And one of the feedback points I had for the course description, they've written out all of the key skills and how that maps onto the qualifications framework, was that nowhere in there did it talk about self-reflection and using video to self-reflect. And I think that given the technology we've got available to us, if you're not videoing yourself or recording yourself, one of the biggest tips I got from a colleague back in New Zealand, Bevan, was voice record yourself teaching. And that will tell you if you are a repeater, and you don't need to worry about where you are and if the video actually captures you and all that sort of stuff. But it will tell you if you are monotonous. It'll tell you if you are talking too much. It will tell you if you are using tick words. It will tell you if you are not using enough up and down and all this sort of stuff. And it's just really easy to do. Stick your phone on voice memo and record your intro. And then listen to it back. And doing that will make your intro better the next class, and iterate on that. And then it becomes something that you can do naturally.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's made me think of a coach that's part of BASE. She's also head of marketing as well. So she's very involved in a lot of stuff we do. And she does our Thai language podcasts as well, because we put out regular podcasts for the Build Your Base show. And she didn't want to look back. She didn't want to listen to it. She didn't want to watch the videos. You hate listening
to your own voice. Like everybody does, no matter.
But you got to get over that, right? You've just got to get over it. And I think the more you hear your voice recorded, the more it just kind of sounds normal. But at first you're like, that's not how I sound, is it? Surely. It's horrible. But once you get over that, it's fine and it sounds normal, right? And I think I've really tried to teach her, because we work very closely together, the things that I've learned and what's really helped me, because I know it's going to really help her as well. So I push her, I kind of almost force her to do these things sometimes, but it's for her own good. And I know she really values the learning and development she's had through going through the same processes.
So I think that takes us to a really good point, which is to finish up this conversation. So overall, what I'm hearing from you is that individual focus and feedback, a culture of feedback and self-improvement is kind of central to what you do at Base and how you make your instructors great. Is that fair? Is there anything else that you would add to sort of the special sauce of what you do?
I think that's very fair. We talk a lot about the process that you go through at Base when you are delivering a group class. And the element that we added on afterwards was everything that goes on outside of the class.
Right.
So that's hanging around out at Base afterwards, chatting to the clients, finding out a little bit about them. Sometimes real sort of groups of communities form, and that's obviously what we want as a boutique studio. That's really what makes boutique fitness great, I think, and that's what helps people feel better about coming to Base and ultimately get healthier, fitter, and stronger. And then all the stuff that you do on the social media side. Some people use their personal Instagram channel for posting about Base, or some create a separate channel if they want to keep their private lives separate. We don't have anything that they must do, but we give a lot of suggestions and a lot of advice on how they can kind of build up that community and connect with people. You can add people on Instagram, they can write their handle on the board, and then you add them and tag them afterwards, obviously getting their permission for all of it as well. And so we help coaches build that kind of personal brand online and also offline, and also help them build that community within their sort of followers as well. And sometimes you've got great coaches that are a little bit shy, and they get all of that right, but they're a little bit shy and they struggle with that stuff outside. So we added that into our training as kind of like the missing link to bring it all together. And then ultimately we found if you get that group class experience, great. And again, that starts, when you're programming the class, maybe an hour or a day before, right up to the time when you wrap up the class bang on time. Get that right. If you can combine that with the outside stuff as well, you've kind of got the dream combination.
Agree, completely agree. So if our listeners would like to know more about Base or listen to you more, because obviously we talked about the fact you've got a podcast, can you just tell them where they can find you? So what to look for your podcast and your studio?
For the fitness related stuff I've talked about today, Base Bangkok, and that's .com or Instagram handle. For my own stuff,
all of this as well, obviously.
Awesome. Yeah, for my own stuff, Fitness Business Asia, we've got a goal of raising the standards of the fitness industry in Asia, but we do have a lot of listeners outside, and we pulled in guests from outside Asia, such as yourself as well. So it's quite a well-rounded perspective, which I think would help anyone in the fitness industry. But just Google Fitness Business Asia, whack it into Apple or Spotify, and we'll pop up top.
Perfect. So, Jack, thank you so much for joining us to talk about creating a high-performing team of instructors. I'm sure that we will chat again. We didn't even touch on the situation in Thailand with COVID, which is maybe a good thing, right? Yeah. So we're going to pretend like that didn't happen and conclude a really good conversation that didn't involve COVID at all right until the end. So thank you very much for joining us, and good luck with continued growth with Base and the fitness industry in Thailand.
I appreciate it, Will, and all the best for Shift.
Cheers.